This Warriors Life Podcast 2024 featuring Fonzie, episode 17, brought to you by King's Container Crew, the greatest container crew mob in the land for your container packing and unpacking solutions throughout Australia and New Zealand, or to apply for a position on the KCC team, head to kingscontainercrew.com and hit the Work With Us tab. A great bunch of lads, and we love their support here at This Warriors Life. Brad and I joining you, recording on an early, frosty Wednesday morning. Brad, this is definitely the earliest we've ever recorded, mate.
Yeah, mate, I'm fresh out the scratcher. Just getting my second cup of tea into me now. Kids are off to school, and yeah, this is unfamiliar territory. Not unlike that bloody team we support. Four on a row. Far out. What's going down?
Yeah, it's been a pretty rough month, mate. Now, just before we get into that, I'm going to confront you on air. I mean, bonus Friday afternoon pod, promo videos, early morning recordings. Are you angling for a spin-off? Is that what's going on here? Your work ethic, it's gone through the roof.
I just know I can't bring the statistical facts and the analysis like Fonz can. So I've got to pick up the shovel somewhere else and do what I can. Yeah, no, I'm into it, eh? Come see me in 3 weeks. I'll be you wouldn't have heard from me. I'll be gone.
Yeah, Brad, that game against the Knights on the weekend, I mean, it just keeps getting a little bit worse each week. Pretty disappointing, 14-8 in atrocious conditions, and just kind of seemed like they couldn't be fucked, really.
I didn't think you could get anything uglier than that field, but geez, did they prove me wrong. What is up? Firstly, what was up with that field? Who put the mower too low at that end? Was that an apprentice groundsman down there put it down to number 2 instead of had it on 4? Jeez.
Yeah, it's pretty glaring. Poor old McDonald Jones Stadium ground stuff. What's going on there?
No, it was horrendous, but yeah, it wasn't pretty, was it? One thing, it wasn't a pretty game, but geez, I got sick of them telling us how good the Knights were playing and how rubbish the Warriors were. The Knights played good for the first 15 minutes because they held the ball, and then as far as I'm concerned, they were just as dog poo. The only difference maybe was Jackson Hastings' kicking game, I thought, but I thought they were pretty rat shit as well. But yeah, what a dud game. Far out. If it wasn't raining, I would have gone outside and watched my grass grow instead. Watching that.
Yeah, pretty ugly, and it was ugly right from the start. I know the Warriors have started pretty well on the whole all season, but they decided to skip the scoring an early try or two business and get straight to giving away pressure relieving penalties and fucking up on the goal line. Could have been a lot worse too. A couple of blunders from Chance and Marcelo after that first try that could have led to more, but got back in a good position. Great try to Dylan Walker, and then levelled up early in the second half, but just couldn't find a follow-up blow. Pretty pedestrian attack. Ran out of ideas, obviously not the right conditions, and certainly not the right conditions to just rely on that slingshot play out the right. And yeah, just couldn't find any more points. It was very, very tough to watch.
It has been one unanswered question, hasn't it, while Webby's been there? Webby's game plan in the wet seems to struggle, and that's a horrible day to try and dig yourself out of the slump, as well as not being the greatest team in the wet. Yeah, far out. Oh, well, what can you do about it? Dust yourself off? Go again?
Yeah, I guess so. It's, as you say, unfamiliar territory for Webster, for the team under him. And as you take a step back, it is fascinating to see how he and the team reacts. But man, they're in a hole. Before we move on to this week and where the season's at, just wanted to touch on the bunker calls, because it's obviously caused a fair bit of debate. Here's my take, Brad.
Okay.
The Dallin penalty try or non-penalty try debate. I mean, people are calling it a clear penalty try, blah, blah, blah. Show me a precedent. There has never been, this rule only came in, by the way, in 2020 that you couldn't, that you couldn't tackle an attacking player in the air.
Yeah.
But since that rule's come in, we haven't seen a penalty try awarded in that scenario. To me, it's the same as if there's a high tackle on the try line and the player coughs up the ball. I haven't seen a penalty try for that. Same shoulder charge. You see players coming with a shoulder charge, and it stops the try. It's obviously illegal. No penalty try, though. And, yeah, probably the only thing that would have changed with that call was he could have gone to the bin. The tackle was a bit early, too, which didn't really get touched on in the commentary. But, yeah, certainly a bin. I mean, but, yeah, happy with the not a penalty try. The obstruction, Jackson Ford in the second half, I mean, he ran into him. It's pretty black and white these days. If you don't want to get your tries disallowed, don't make contact with the defender. I mean, I know it's a grey area and he milked it, but why wouldn't you? The barometer for, getting annoyed with refereeing decisions is, I think, how you'd feel if it was the other team.
Yeah.
On the other side of it, and they'd got awarded those tries. I would have been fucking ropeable if either of those got awarded against the Warriors. So I think it's fairly black and white that those both were not tries.
I'm in the same boat as you. Well, it's like, to be honest, geez, the way Dowland's playing, if Marju wasn't there, he probably would have dropped it. I'm exactly on the same page as you. Blocker was blowing up deluxe. Bloody tackle without the ball, bro. So I'm in the same boat as you. If it was the other on the shoe was on the other foot, yeah, I don't know if I would have swallowed that pill.
I'll blocker. That added to the occasion, and that was after I watched the entire New South Wales Cup game, and Jesus, Mark Carroll. I mean,
how's he got a contract?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. He's shocking to listen to. Comes up with 10 times worse calls than blocker. Yeah, Spud.
All Spud Carroll wants is someone to. He just wants someone to punch someone in the head. That's all he's sitting there waiting for that whole game, Spud Carroll. He's so aggressive and unhinged. Yeah, blocker. He thought he was a bit of a rugby league savant during that game after spotting that penalty try possibility. And yeah, he got cocky and all of a sudden he was making wild accusations left, right and centre. There was a couple of times Vossi was there having to sort of just talk away from the subject and blocker kept broaching it. Yeah, so that was entertaining. It was probably one of the most entertaining things of the game was hearing old blocker go around for 80 minutes. But bank it. One thing you got to give him credit for, after the previous game, the week before, everyone was saying, we need to tidy up our defence. And they did. The Knights were camped on our line for large periods of that game, but maybe that week they must have just trained defence all week and didn't run any attacking plays because that all of a sudden's gone by the wayside. But it's confidence, isn't it? And at the time, if people could see our group chat, gee whiz, we were friggin' cutting people from the team left, right, and centre. But now I've had to think about it and seen the team list, which we'll touch on shortly. I'm sort of glad there hasn't been too many wholesale changes, especially with the run we've got coming up. I don't think it's any time to be bringing in someone with less experience coming up against the Chooks and the Panthers and the likes of what we've got in a few weeks. So, yeah, not time to chuck out the baby with the bathwater yet, but there's a few people under pressure.
Yeah, sure is. It's not Webster's style to make, unenforced changes at all.
Would you not be just admitting to that you're getting it wrong if you're as a coach as well? If all of a sudden you're making wholesale changes, all of a sudden you're accepting fault for something and a player's not doing the right thing. So he'll stick with it because I think he knows what he's got. But yeah, it's tough times, but also quite enjoyable again, isn't it? Just getting into the grind.
Yeah. Hello, darkness, my old friend. It's yeah.
Come at me.
We might have to, it might be time to. I know people saying, it's a long season, still early days. Well, it's not that early days. We're we're more than a third of the way through our games. And just to give you some stats, Brad, we've obviously got a 3-1-7 record now. 3 wins, 1 draw, 7 losses.
Oh,
5 losses. This is after 9 games. 3-1-5. If we lose, we've got a very tough fortnight. Roosters and Panthers, both in Australia, over the next 2 Sundays. Obviously, we're rank outsiders to win either game. If we were to lose them both, which you have to say is a strong probability, be 3-1-7. Now, only 6 times have we, in our 29 seasons, have we won less than 4 of our first 11 games, which is a phenomenal stat in itself, given how we are traditionally slow starters throughout our history. Common thread is none of those sides got anywhere near playing finals footy, despite a couple of mid-year revivals in those seasons. And just to put it even in more stark terms, the last time a team made the finals after picking up less than 8 competition points from their first 11 games was Parramatta in 2009. They started exactly the same way, 3 wins and a draw from their first 11. And it took a superhuman run of form from Jared Hayne to get them to scrape into 8th. So, that's where we could be looking down the barrel of after 11 rounds, or 11 games. So, yeah, it's certainly a tough little juncture we find ourselves at.
I tell you what, casting your eye through the drawer and looking, like as you do, desperation, looking for where the points are going, it's all of a sudden every game looks quite tough. The competition's pretty even, and anyone can sort of jag a win this year, even right down the bottom. So it's going to be a tough old slog to the finish line, and to get to the 8's going to be quite an effort from here. But we've got the cattle. I think we'll be better against the better teams. It's like, when you play pool. I played a lot of pool, and you can get good at pool, but as soon as you play pool against a shit player, you end up down at their level. So I'm keen to come against some quality sides to help us play ourselves into form, as opposed to trying to play yourself into form against some of these duds. We seem to be getting dragged to their level and getting in an arm wrestle where it shouldn't be an arm wrestle. We should have slammed their friggin' hand on the deck straight away and just pulverised them. But I don't know.
Yeah, that is a hallmark of Warriors teams of yesteryear, playing down to the level, and at times last year. We've sort of, went on that winning streak last year, but we're kind of struggling to put away those.
We weren't
also ran
teams, were we? We weren't flogging teams. We were beating teams that we should be beating, but not convincingly.
So this week against the Roosters, only the second time this year that we've gone in as an underdog. Last week was the 5th time we've failed to come away with the win as a favourite. This is with the bookies, but yeah, we're obviously firm underdogs in this one, and I am kind of looking forward to that without, the pressure of expectation, thinking we should win this.
Yeah.
Might give them a bit of a chance to recalibrate.
It's almost more comfortable sometimes knowing you got less likelihood of winning a game, and you just like that back. Well, Payton, is it, that game against the Roosters back in the day, where it was one of our best games we thought under Todd Payton, and we lost to the Roosters. But all I want to see is improvement, a bit of grit, a bit of nous, a bit of flair. Geez, I want to see some flair and someone that can rip a game open. We're lacking that at the moment. Someone to turn the tide of momentum just with a trick play or just an individual brilliance. And it's hard to see where that's going to come from at the moment. DWZ, he's got it, but it's always on the end of something a lot of time. But yeah, that's what I want to see.
Yeah, and obviously those weren't the greatest conditions to be showcasing it, but on the back of our chat with Sammy Hewitt last week, and he sort of talked about the Warriors' lack of an X factor and unpredictability factor, and it was certainly apparent on Sunday that it just didn't seem like it was going to come from anywhere. Sean was obviously dominating the attack, but couldn't really conjure anything. And when you've got most teams have a fullback with a bit more flair. I know we love Chance and his strengths, but in a game like that, when you're crying out for a game breaker, his limitations, I guess, kind of get amplified. And you've got your Drinkwater's, Tedesco's, Walsh's, all those sort of players that can just bust a game open from nothing, and we just don't have that.
No, both of us know the answer. I don't think is putting Rog back there either. Like that's not. I'm not leading to that. If anything, I'd like to see Rog push to a wing if maybe Montoya's form stays in a bit of a rut. But yeah, it's just I think that's where the Raiders got to with Chance as well after a while, wasn't it? Like you knew you got the comfort and stability back there, but they just needed that little bit more. But it's easy to be negative when you're going bad, and like all of a sudden,
yeah. Well, Fonz sort of touched on Twitter, like when things aren't going so well, you know your natural tendency is to want something or anything to change, just to make yourself feel a bit better.
Yeah.
Even if it's not necessarily going to do anything. If there's no evidence, despite being no evidence that that's going to improve things. I guess that's the way Webster's gone with the team list this week. If we have a wee look, it is essentially an unchanged 17. We've got obviously Kurt Capewell ruled out. He went off with a calf injury midway through the first half last weekend. Jazz Tavanga makes a return. He'll come onto the bench to fill that spot, with Bunty Afoa pushing up to the starting front row and Mitch Barnett shifting to the edge. So yeah, and he's otherwise kept the same lineup. Brad, would you have? We'll talk about the potential changes, because there were people calling for a couple of players' heads. Yeah, were you surprised or satisfied to see them run out with the same lineup?
I at this stage, coming up against who they are, I wasn't surprised. There's a couple of players under pressure, but I think they'll get a chance, especially up to the bye round. I reckon they'll give them a chance up into the bye round, because we're starting to get a bit of cattle back in our reserves and extended bench now as well. I noticed Lussick's off suspension now. Jazz comes back. I'm hoping Jazz is back to full fitness, which they were good at last year. They were good at getting the players back to full fitness before bringing them back in. But I don't know, with Capewell going off pretty early, was he right to go out last week, or was he just rushed back in to steady up that middle?
Well, it was a throat injury.
Was it a throat? He
was out with? Yeah, so they don't know if the calf was a pre-existing thing, but yeah, he's quality player, but been a bit of a lemon so far, to be honest. Few injuries, and out this week. Just so looking at the back line, we've obviously talked a fair bit about Marcelo Montoya. He's been struggling for a few weeks. I'd say the entire three-quarter line is struggling.
Yeah.
Rocco hasn't been going that well the last few weeks. Dallin's been all over the show. Roger's probably been our most reliable performer, but we're kind of thinking maybe he'll be better off on the wing. But then is it because, that right side, left side attack is just not firing? He's not getting anything quality to work with. But at centre there.
Yeah, that's why I like Rog going to a wing, to give him a bit more space, a little bit more roaming. He can be involved in some of those early plays, maybe some kick returns. I think he can be a bit more. That if we're talking changes, and this is not what I want, but this is in my mind on the horizon for people coming in. Talfa, is it Talfa Graham?
Moala Graham Talfa, yeah.
That's the one, yeah. I'd be looking at him, and even Tane Taupiki. I'd be starting to groom him as a 5'8" or something like that as well. I'm forecasting 3-4 years down the track, him and Jet Cleary as a halves combination. He's a smart kid. I heard him talk after the game. He seems super intelligent, and he's doing it like you were saying on the phone on the weekend. He's doing a lot of the kicking and organising anyway in that team. So I'd be sort of training him up.
Yeah, he's essentially playing as a half in New South Wales Cup with the number one on his back and doing all the kick return meters. He's been doing the bulk of the last tackle kicking. He's been doing a lot of playmaking. His passing numbers are just as high as the halves. So he can certainly do it. He came through the grades as a half, as a 5'8", so certainly an option there. If Tamati, whether it's a game plan or whether Tamati is just struggling to have an influence on games, not quite sure.
I'd like to see.
Obviously we're so favoured towards our right side, but you want to see someone that's willing to take the game on, and Tane has shown that any time that he's played in the NRL or obviously New South Wales Cup that he'll wants to take the ball by the horns and try and create something.
I think his size limits him. I don't think he's ever going to be a big-time first-grade fullback just for his size. And this is just in the future. I'm not saying rush him in now, because preferably once Chanel's fit, I'd like to see him get a run in the 6 jersey, to be honest. He punched a bit of energy in those early games when he was playing. He's got a stiff shoulder on him. Bit of a kicking game. I think he might offer a little bit more than Tamari Martin is at the moment. But, yeah, it's all shoulda, coulda, woulda at the moment. Just this team's done well in the past, this exact team. Yep. So there's no reason they can't compete again. I can't wait for the likes of Nakore to come back in, and Tom Arley's been playing good, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's been going all right. I thought Bunty was pretty good.
Yeah,
off returning last week. He'll obviously start this week. Just again looking at those potential 3/4 line options, whether it's Roger moving to a wing and bringing in a centre, or keeping it centre and chucking someone else on Montoya's wing. There's so much talent in that New South Wales Cup team. Ed Cossey's still an option. He's been okay in New South Wales Cup without doing anything amazing. But yeah, Moala Graham Taufa and the young 18-year-old CEO Carly, I'm all over this kid. He's such a talent. I don't, probably too early he's only had a handful of New South Wales Cup games, and also there's the top 30 squad scenario. I don't know who's actually eligible to come up to NRL until after round 10? I
think so.
But yeah, there's certainly options there. Ali Leitao was the other one.
Who's that second kid you mentioned then? I haven't.
CEO Carly. So he looks fairly small, but he's an absolute natural. He's set up tries. He seems to break a tackle with every touch, and just the kind of kid that can create something out of nothing, and looks a really natural centre, left centre as well. He's been playing where Roger's spot in first grade. Ali Leitawa, a lot of people calling for him to come straight in. He didn't actually play last week at all, and he hasn't been named this week. Doesn't seem to be on any injury list, but so not playing at the moment. So obviously not an option to come in. Because if we're looking at this weekend, Adam Pompey seems like a bit of a wasted interchange spot. Purely bench
as
cover.
He was last week.
Obviously didn't get used. The Capewell injury sort of played into that, but Pompey did start in the second row for New South Wales Cup a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if he's sort of seen as a second row cover or not, but again, it seems like an odd choice with Jacob Laban, who was used for a few first grade games, late change there with Pompey. He's 18th man. I don't quite see the point in having Pompey, on the bench purely for backline cover. I mean, if you're gonna look at probabilities, the probability is that you're not going to have a backline injury, and if there is, well, you can probably chuck Dylan Walker out in the centres if needed. So
exactly,
why not run the probability that you're not going to have that injury and have a second row?
I think
second row like Laban.
It'd be paying good short money that Pompey stays there this weekend, wouldn't it? With who they're going up against, you look at that interchange bench of the Chooks, far out. I think we need someone more than Pompey there to try and stop them getting a roll forward.
Yeah, well, you'd be pretty tempted to roll with another middle forward on there, whether that's Mau to change a bit of momentum. But looking at the Roosters team, I mean, they put the cleaners through the injury hit Broncos last Friday. That was a week after putting 60 on the Dragons. They're flying at the moment, and they've been boosted massively. Daniel Tupou, Jared Waidea-Hargreaves, who's playing his 300th game for the club, Victor Radley, all returning to injury. And if that wasn't bad enough, Spencer Leniu back from suspension for the first time since round one.
It's great news.
They'll be running a bench of Connor Watson, who's been great. He was outstanding last week, and the just the perfect utility, a quality number 9, but also, halves cover and middle forward. Then you got Nalfahu White, who's been really good this year, Leniu, and Terrell May, who's been outstanding as well. And then you look at the starting pack: JWH, Brandon Smith, a hooker, Lindsay Collins, Angus Crichton, who's on fire, Nat Butcher, super underrated, and Radley at lock. So not much respite there. And the back line: Tedesco, Tupou, Soali'i, who's having a big season, Manu, we know what he can do, Dominic Young, bit of a Dallin type, bit flighty, bit flaky, but brilliant.
Yeah.
Luke Carey and Walker in the halves. So, yeah, on paper, tough one.
Very tough. And then you give a hothead that runs on all sorts of emotion and can play like a man possessed, Hargraves in his 300th. That's awesome to come up against too, eh? Warriors luck.
We do have some good form in 300 games. Obviously, the Jared Croker affair last year, publicised.
Thank you.
So maybe we'll lean on that a little bit. Another interesting sidelight to this game: Casey Badger is the referee after obviously getting plenty of attention for her game between the Tigers and Bulldogs. Now, obviously, the vitriol directed at her, a lot of it on social media and whatnot, was pretty gross. And pretty sexist, but she did have an absolute shocker in that game, and probably lucky to be refereeing a game this weekend. And obviously that just, I guess, puts more attention on this game. But yeah, they just had an afternoon game at Allianz. It has a real sort of blockbuster feel, even if the Warriors aren't going that well. I think, there's something about it that it says to me that, doesn't it could be the sea change. Yeah.
It could be high tempo. Chooks, like, they have been playing good, but geez, they've still got a shit game in them for some reason, don't they? They're
they can concede some points.
Yeah.
They've been the Broncos and Dragons both scored 3 tries in those blowouts. And the Broncos, did fight back to get to 18 or with a man in the bin, before they'd start dropping like flies, or while they were dropping like flies, and then Roosters finish over the top of them. So they're not the finished product, the Roosters. And yeah, hopefully we can just get back to being who we are and frustrate them and get into that grind and find some points ourselves.
God, a good little side watch I've been keeping an eye on this year. Jeez, I'm loving what the Roosters are going to build next year. It's going to be like the Avengers. They got Iron Man, Thor. They can just afford to buy everyone. It's going to be pretty crazy with all the players they're losing and the money they've got to spend. And usually they can squeeze a few more in that sort of dollar amount anyway. It's going to be out of it what they field next year.
There was a story last week that they were after Sean Johnson as a replacement for Luke Carey, who's retiring. Don't see that happening, and it was fairly quickly squashed, that story. But yeah, interesting. Anyway, obviously Fafita, Sean Johnson still.
One thing, wouldn't it be good if we were like Fafita's looking at them and the Panthers? They chat about him. We don't have imagine having a Fafita in our team, just an absolute monster that can just fend off people and make someone look stupid out of nothing. That's the type of player that I think we're missing at the moment. Not that I say we should be chasing him, but it's kind of, I'm a little bit jealous that Panthers or Chooks could end up with someone like that in their ranks.
Yeah, well, game-breaking second row, and obviously, Capewell and Ford probably. I think Ford can be a game breaker, but just on that, he was moved to the right to start this week with Capewell on the left, and obviously Capewell went off injured, but he played the full 80 on the right edge. He was pretty effective on the left as a sort of hole running weapon off Johnson. There was a streak of 4 games where he had a line break all off Johnson passes. Got a couple of tries from it. Why would they go away from that? Kind of confuses me. They switched it up when Capewell was out injured and Laban came into the starting team. But yeah, and so it'll be interesting to see who starts on what edge this time. I don't quite see the rationale behind that because, it was a point of difference. It was one of the few times we were going to the right and actually finding, any sort of joy. on attack. So yeah.
One got a little bit of light in the darkness at the moment. Gee, Dylan Walker played good when he come on the other day, didn't he?
Yeah,
Done everything he could to try and change that game.
Yeah, scored the try. Super involved the entire time he's on the field. He was great against the Titans, I thought, and even better against the Knights in a pretty ordinary team. So yeah, 1+ for sure, individual wise, and for Noah Blake continuing to dominate in a pretty lackluster side too.
Where did all that hair come from all of a sudden? I thought he had a shaved head. Next minute he looks like Bunty Afoa out there.
Well,
where was he hiding that?
Yeah, I don't know what was going on there. It's like he got a perm or something before the game and got a bit of volume.
Frizzed.
Yeah.
Must have been humid day in Newcastle. Like Tracy when she goes on holiday in Fiji. You should see her. It's like Courtney Cox or Friends. It's what my Trace goes like. Yeah, big buffont.
Better look at some Ladbrokes odds, Brad. Ladbrokes, a great supporter of this Warriors life as well. Now, geez, have we blown out in that premiership market? $34 now. So you got the very, very clearly defined top six of Penrith, Brisbane, Melbourne, Roosters, Cronulla and Manly. And then on the seventh line, it is the Warriors and the Dolphins. So Dolphins getting a bit of respect there. And geez, they're my second team for sure, just quietly. But
are they?
Yeah, but even more glaring than that, Warriors blown out to $13 to make the top four. Geez, it need a lot to go right to make the top four from here. But in the top 8 market, $2.75 now. So that puts us on the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th line of betting in the top 8 market. The Raiders, the Bulldogs, the Cowboys, and the Dolphins are all favoured, or all shorter in that market. So
ahead of us,
more favoured to make the top 8. So that kind of suggests to me we're actually ahead of all those teams, or equal in the premiership market. I think that we can go all the way if we get our shit together and make the 8. But at the moment, it's looking a bit shaky that we'll actually be in the finals at all. So, yeah, interesting times, all right. Looking at the head-to-head market for this game on Sunday, Roosters, unsurprisingly, $1.24 favourites with an 11.5-point start. So they got that one about right, based on form and everything else in the background ahead of this one. But I'd chuck a few bucks on the Warriors to cover at least and make a good game of this one. And geez, 410 for the upset is pretty juicy too. Check the Ladbrokes blog later this week. I'll be as soon as I hang up on this call, I'll be ripping into my round 10 preview for Ladbrokes. We have links up for that. Yeah.
You're right to handle that. Do you want me to write anything on that?
Well, I thought you might have a bit of some background stats and point start trends for the season that you could send through. Have you got those sorted, or?
I'll have a look through my journal. I'm sure I'll have something jotted down somewhere.
Yeah, that'd be good, mate. Just fax it through.
No, I'll be up. Yeah, I'll flick it.
That'd probably do us, Brad.
Yeah. I'm thinking
starting to get a bit warmer out there.
Shit itself.
Oh, is it? It's a nice sunny day.
Warmer. We're going the opposite. She's about 10 at the moment, and then by 3 o'clock it's 4 degrees and pissing down. So something to look forward to. But I'm sitting here shivering in the shed. Oh, that's why I didn't turn the heater on. I'll go grab a shower. Geez, I've had a nightmare. Just a quick little yarn. I've nightmare showering lately. Not I can handle. I know how to shower. But I keep getting in every Sunday afternoon. Tracy's obviously done. I'll go in there. I'll get in the shower. And always when we've got guests, I'll get in the shower and I'll finish with my shower, turn it off. I look out, no towels. No towels in the bathroom. Got guests. Can't even do a nudie run. So I've got to get dried like an Olympic diver with a flannel. I look every now and then. I'd have to dry myself whole time with a flannel, like something like those Olympic divers when they get out and they wring out that little thing. That's what I'm doing every time. I can't. So I've got to lock into my memory that Trace does the towels on a Sunday, or at least hide a towel somewhere hidden. I might do it up in the
Emergency
extractor fan ducting. Emergency towel up in the extractor fan, just so I can't do it. But every time lately,
Oh, there's nothing.
the options are
What about, have you got? Is your ensuite? Can you like scream out to Tracy for a towel? I can yell out to Ray.
No. Oh, I can.
Yeah.
No, she's at that.
Yeah, it's
the other end of the house.
Yeah.
Other end of the house.
No chance.
And I don't want to complain to Tracy about not. It'd be a pretty bold move to complain that she's not washing the towels and at the same time as taking it out, replenishing the towels. So I think replenishing should be on my to-do list. I just need to look up and be aware of my surroundings before I jump in the shower, I think. I had to get dry with a singlet. God, singlets don't soak up nothing, eh? Nothing at all once. Yeah, so
maybe you should,
and it's not the type of house.
Maybe you should.
What?
You're a builder, Brad. Just whip up a linen cupboard inside your ensuite. Just chuck all the towels for the house in that little cupboard.
Trace would love it, eh? Just I'll give the ask to a couple of the pot plants in that, and I'll put in a little linen cupboard for me, like a gun safe. I'm going to have it lock and key as well, just so I know there's towels there. So no, that's what I'm trying to deal with at the moment. But otherwise, I'll shoot out and I suppose I better make some money for the day, eh? Because this doesn't make money.
Yeah, what are you doing on it?
I got to shoot over to Brent's, measure up his garage ceiling. He wants that relined, and at the same time as there, I'll have chuck a tape over his deck that he wants.
Brento, the old shagger. Say good day from me.
Yeah. No, he's a shot, mate. Okay, so Brent. So now that's what we've got on this week, and you've got Fonz and the guy, not the guys, from Eye Test you're about to jump into, eh?
Yeah, Rugby League Eye Test. Very excited. So we'll get cracking onto that right now. See, through the magic of podcasting, that's actually about 6 or 7 hours away. But for you, it's only going to take a few seconds before you hear me, Fonz, and the Rugby League Eye Test. So thanks, Brad. You have the rest of the day. Oh, TWL duties, mate. You've put in a good shift, and we'll catch up with you next week, mate.
Awesome, bruv. See you, Bill.
Before we welcome in Fonz and our guest, just a quick plug for the Mix and Pick game this week. Brian, Justin, the team at Mix and Pick doing a great job putting on this awesome game for us every week. The biggest Mix and Pick This Warriors Life game ever over the weekend. 154 players. Hector getting the win. He's only just joined, so anyone that thinks, you're not going to be able to match it with these seasoned veterans, Hector is the proof that you can come in, scoop that This Warriors Life t-shirt, limited edition, the prize, on your first go. So he's got 8 points last week in a 10-way tie, but the Mix and Bot randomly picked him as the winner. Brad and I, a bit disappointing, only 5 points this week. Looking at the season leaderboard, 03 represent from Christchurch. He's top spot. Bill Spleen, 75, is in second, and Forbes GP from Timaru, maybe an unlikely top three there. A couple of South Islanders. An 8th spot, Bunty Appreciation Society. I imagine that's Anton Poser. He loves this stuff. I'm in 38th. I'll take that. I reckon I'm a bit like the Warriors. I'll come good mid-season and come steaming down the straight for a final spot. And Brad Larking, 46th. Fighting it out for the prestigious TWL season championship mug. Just a bit of admin from last week's game. The diehard trivia. Jacob Lillyman, of course, was the Aussie who's played the most games for the Warriors. Now, he wasn't the most popular pick either, so a few people leaving points out on the field there. Come on, guys. Jacob Lillyman, 7th all-time, 188 games. He's miles in front of everyone else of the Aussies that played for the Warriors. And the back fence won the vote for the name of the new Warriors bar. But I still think North Stand should have won. Well, it wasn't listed, but yeah, if that was included, surely that would have got up. new releases in the game this week, you can change your answers anytime before kickoff. So apart from trivia, can't go and cheat. But the other questions, you can go in and change your answers. And for certain questions, you can even change them after the match starts. If you don't like how things are unfolding in the first few minutes, you can jump in and make the change. Also, any NBL fans out there, there's a dedicated Canterbury Rams game for any Christchurch Hoops fans. And you can win a signed 2023 championship singlet. How good. The NBL season leaderboard. Number 1 is Casey Frank, the former Tall Black and current Sky commentator. He's leading the rankings there. Get in there and play it. Any NBL fans, jump in and play this week's game ahead of the Warriors clash with the Roosters for your chance to win this Warriors Life T-shirt number 10. Now, give it up for Fonzie and the Rugby League Eye Test.
Alrighty, so jumping in hot here into the next part of this Warriors Life podcast today, I've just been listening to Sen's Radio. Our mate Sammy Hewitt, who was on the show last week, was quoting some stats from someone called the Rugby League Eye Test. And if you listen to our pod, you'll have heard that name before, and you'll probably have gone and seen some of the work that guy does. And Sammy was sort of talking about that in the context of what's wrong with the Wars, and then he was obviously on his mind when he interviewed Andrew Webster later in that show. So if you haven't heard that, go and have a listen to Running It Straight today on Sens. But we thought, being independent podcasters that we are with a bit more time, we might be able to do a bit of a deeper dive into some of the things Sammy was talking about. And we're very lucky to have today with us Andrew from the Rugby League Eye Test, who's going to walk us through some of his most recent work on Noirs. Andrew, how are you, mate?
I'm doing very well, thank you, and I appreciate you guys giving me the time to come on your podcast. I've been enjoying listening to it recently, especially with the shout-outs to the site. So, yeah, thanks. I just wish it could be under better circumstances for the Wires.
Oh, mate, these tough times are interesting times, right? It's not fun at the moment, but in a way, these sorts of times are the things that got me involved in rugby league analysis and podcasting. When it's straightforward, it's just fun. But when things are going wrong and you can't quite put your finger on it, that's to me when it's most interesting, gets the gears turning. And so we're hoping you can help us shed some light on what's going wrong. Before we do that, can you give us, to the extent you're comfortable, give us an intro about yourself and the site and where people can find it? Because we're going to be talking a lot about it today.
Sure. So I'll get the plugs out of the way first, so don't forget them later. So the website is www.rugbyleagueeyetest.com. I'm on all your favorite and least favorite social media sites at League Eye Test. So I've been doing this is I think my 5th season, which is a bit concerning when I realize it's been that long. But I originally started doing just collecting data and doing some player analysis because I was playing Supercoach, and to me it was I work as a full-time data analyst as my day job. So that was just something I do for my work, and thought I can use this to try and get ahead in Supercoach. And I did a little bit better, still wasn't great. And eventually I started thinking, why are these players getting certain scores? Was there certain trends from different teams? Are they running things differently? Just all those different game metrics and things like that might lead to players, getting more tackles or making more runs or getting more line breaks. And I started to find that far more interesting than the individual player stats. So I started building up numbers and things. And then as we hit 2020 with the rule change for the set restarts and 6 again, so we're seeing a lot of stats coming out saying, there's more tries, there's more of this, there's more of that. And I was thinking, isn't that just because there's more, the ball's in play more and there's more opportunities to collect stats? And so that's how I started doing it. And I got frustrated trying to put things on social media where there's not a lot of leeway with word counts and stuff like that. And so I just set up a website and started analyzing what was happening with set restarts, and it sort of was rolled on from there. I'd never expected it to be anything like it is now. I thought maybe there'd be a couple of dozen data sickos like myself who would be interested in this sort of thing, but I'm really surprised how widely it's grown and how popular it's been. So, and again, appreciate you guys having me on the pod.
If you're looking for sickos, mate, you've come to the right place. So, I want to walk through the article you put out this week, which was titled "What's Up with the Wars," and I want to do that to understand a bit about your methodology and what it tells us and doesn't tell us about the Warriors, because we're still on this journey of trying to get to the bottom of what's wrong with the Wars. And Webby made some comments on Sens earlier today, like I said, and we'll sort of compare what Webby said to what you're seeing. So maybe I'll start with asking you just to explain sort of a core part of your methodology, which is this expected points scored and expected points conceded based on field positions. I've explained this on the pod before, but can you give us your sort of explainer?
Yeah, I really liked your explainer a few weeks ago. So I've actually sort of almost tried to take that word for word in some of my posts. But I think you also made a good point about before saying what the data doesn't show you, and I think that's one thing that I want to make clear is that as much as I do all my work around data and saying this is what these trends are and this is what this bit of data says. Like I think rugby league is an incredibly complex game, and it's not something like say baseball or even basketball to an extent where you can model data and sort of get some pretty clear cut ideas of what works and what doesn't work. I think it's far more complex, and there's so many intricate moving parts that I don't think you can actually solve it with data, but I think you can get some interesting insights out of it. So I don't want anyone to think like I'm proposing that you can only learn things from data in rugby league. I think that's out of the question. But on the topic of expected points, so basically in a rough way, more summary way, it's what is the value of the field position you had in a game. So it looks at we'll take the location of a play the ball, and depending on which tackle it was on, that look at the probability of a try being scored from that position on the field and that tackle. So if you think about on field, play the ball 10 meters out right in front of the sticks would have a much higher probability of a try being scored than 30 meters out on the right-hand touch line. And so if you look at each of those individual instances from a game, sum them all up, you get a value, which is, again, I sort of said I've called it expected points. There's probably a misnomer. It's probably more closer to what is the value of your field position for that game.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times it only takes one play the ball for you to score a try, but if you take 5 of them, that's going to give you a higher expected points total. Yeah. So sometimes you'll find that it's not actually the best to be gaining a lot of possession close to the line because it means you're more inefficient. And if we go through the article later, that's sort of what I've based my charts around, is that this number is really interesting on its own, but it loses a lot of context. It doesn't have the right context to explain what's happening. And so when you tie it up with this is what you expected to do and this is what you actually did, that's when you get that real insight. You can actually get some really interesting trends on how teams are performing. And that's sort of what I based this article around with the Wires, where I think, obviously the last month hasn't been fantastic with just 1 point from the last 4 games. But if you look at the way that they've appeared in these charts, and I think you talked about it being, structure and process versus results. I think there's at least a positive sign in there that they're not necessarily doing something wrong. It's more probably a bit of bad luck or a bit of inefficiency, especially with the ball.
Yeah, and so when you talk about expected points or expected return, let's say off a play the ball, that's based on all teams over multi-year data set. Is that how you've worked it out?
I can't remember. Off the top of my head, I can't remember how many years I looked at, but it was at least 4 or 5. But it's based on basically any play the ball in a game for a set number of years on each tackle. Until I had to obviously want to have a significant sample size so that we're not seeing variances just from noise in the data. But it's off a longitudinal trend.
And so, and what you were saying just then too, I'm just sort of helping people frame up as we go into this. So you might, for example, be a team who has lots of play the balls inside 20, and a play the ball inside 20, attacking 20 is a good thing in terms of expected scores. However, if you're a team who can score long-range tries, you'll get fewer play the balls inside 20 just because you're scoring from 30, right? And so on the data, that might actually suggest you might show that you get fewer play the balls inside 20, but that's because you're scoring from 30. Alternatively, if you're a team who's got nothing in attack, you might have set after set online and not score. And so it looks like you've got a heap of play the balls inside 20, and therefore you're expected to be a good team, but it's actually you're tripping over your own feet, right? And that's the reason you've got so many play the balls there. So that's what you meant in terms of that grain of salt around. You can skew the stats depending on the way you play and particular strengths and so on that you have.
Yeah, I've got a good example for that. I was actually putting this together for something else I was doing today. So, and it's somewhat relevant considering the matchup this weekend. So, if you're looking at the Tigers and the Roosters this season, both of them have roughly the same number of play the balls inside 20 as each other. The Tigers have 119 points from those number of play the balls, while the Roosters have 258. So, and if you've looked at the charts on the site, you'll see Tigers incredibly inefficient, Roosters the most efficient team in the competition. As you mentioned, it's not because they're scoring necessarily lots of long range tries, but they're either scoring from further out or taking fewer tackles inside 20 to score those tries. Whereas the Tigers have been horribly inefficient and struggled to execute inside 20 for probably the last decade. And as much as the honeymoon period for Benji looked good, it seems to be over now. And they're sort of fallen back into the same ways for the past few seasons.
Okay, awesome. So let's start rolling through where the Warriors sit in your latest article. Should we start? Let's talk about expected points for and expected points conceded for the Warriors. That chart where the Warriors are actually the outlier team, right? We are. What do you call that quadrant? The bottom right there.
The bottom right. So is that the if it's not got labels on it, they don't have labels for that one. It's just expected. Yeah. So the labels I use on the expected versus actuals.
Yeah, sorry.
Yep.
So in this chart, we're seeing that the Warriors' average expected points scored and expected points conceded is an outlier. We are the furthest bottom right, and that's saying that the expected points conceded for the Warriors is the lowest in the comp.
Correct.
And the expected points scored is actually the highest in the comp.
Yeah, so you can say on both ends of the field. So defensively, the Warriors give up the worst field position, I guess, or I frame it a different way. They're the best at controlling field position for their opponents, and in attack, they have the best field position. So again, if you tie it back to what I was mentioning before, it probably means maybe they're spending a bit too much time in attack without scoring, but it also means that they can withstand a lot of high expected value possession from opponents.
Yeah, so if you were a coach and everything else was equal, you would love this, right? Because this would suggest your team's getting through their sets, getting to the points, controlling where they play their footy. If you don't know what the actuals are, because we're going to come to the actuals in a minute, but if you don't know what the actuals are and you're a coach, you would love this. You would think this is, and so based on this, if you had to guess with no other information, which team is first in the comp, would you guess the Warriors? If you had zero other information at all apart from this chart?
Yeah, it would certainly look that way.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna suggest that this might be, in the case of the Warriors, a sign of good coaching, right? It's a sign that Webby has a system, the players know the system, they're executing the system is getting them to the right points on the field and keeping opposition, away from their preferred points on the field. For example, we see that in the kick chase on that right edge that pins teams, and we work from there. We see that in the back five gaining meters quite easily, rolling through our sets. We'll come to the meters gain stat a bit later. So far, so good. The problem we have is when we get to the, let's start with points scored, attack. When we go and compare what we'd expect to score versus what we actually score, what do we see about the Warriors here, Andrew?
Yeah, so they're sitting in, I put in things into 4 quadrants. So if you score more points than your expected points value, I sort of deem you, more points than league average and more than your expected points put you into an efficient bucket. Mm-hmm. If you score more points than league average, let me restart that. Mm-hmm. If you score more points than league average and have more expected points than league average, we give you put you into a dominant bucket. Mm-hmm. If you score more points than league average but have lower than league average expected points, put you into an efficient bucket because you need less possession to score more points. Mm-hmm. And then put those into some negative categories. So below league average in expected points and actual points scored into a bucket I deem incompetent because they're generally teams that aren't doing very well. And then we have an inefficient quadrant as well where you're scoring less than league average but having more than league average expected points. So it's a little bit of a mouthful there. If you look at it on the side, it might make a bit more sense. But basically trying to put teams into 4 distinct buckets to define how their performances track against expected results.
Yeah. And so this is saying that, as we said before, our expected point scored is really high. Our actuals is on the low side. And so that points to something going wrong where either unlucky over 9 rounds, starting to get less, it's starting to be less able to say it's just luck because the sample size is getting bigger, and perhaps there's something wrong. So, Will, I'll sort of cut to you here, mate. How do you compare that to what you see?
Yeah, I guess on the surface of it, especially over the last month, it seems like we've had more than enough ball to, do good stuff with it and score enough points to win games, and it just hasn't quite been happening. We had, especially towards the back end against the Titans and the Knights, lots of good ball, and couldn't come up with the points to win the game, which would, I guess, back up what the stats say. Good expected points as far as field position goes, but not so much when it comes to putting it on the board.
So I've got 2 things here, Andrew. One is on the chat on Sens just now, Webby said part of the issue is we're getting our good ball at the back end of games, and we're actually winning possession in games, but it's overwhelmingly back-ended that we're winning the possession. So by the time we get the good ball, we're tired, right? So does your model, I doubt, because I don't expect the data set, does it control for the time in the game?
It doesn't, but I would love to do that. And so I think if you actually scroll down further in the post on the site, there is actually an expected point breakdown from that game by minute. And you can see about the 69th point, it just shoots up through the straight up. And I think the point that Webby's made as well about tiredness is something I brought up even later, talking about the number of minutes that Adam Fanua-Blake's had to play over the last month, and whatever reason that's for injuries, and there was the extra time game where I think he played 73 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think, absolutely, it makes sense that you're getting field position, but it's probably not coming at the opportune time, and especially the middles where the team's been quite dominant through the field. The middles are probably a little bit tighter, and it's harder to get the same impact that they'll be getting earlier in the game if they had that field position then. So short answer is I don't have that modeled in. I would love to do it, just lack of time. But I think that's exactly the case.
Yeah, and so you can, because we've talked about discipline in that 20 to 40 minute period in our games, Will, and that kind of fits this story, because this story is talking about, like you're saying, well, actually the problem isn't discipline in terms of it preventing us getting into good opportunities or letting opposition get into good opportunities, because overall in the game we're still achieving that. But what the discipline might be doing in the 20 to 40 is gassing us out in that period when our middles are starting to fatigue anyway, and we're paying for that in the back end if we end up getting the good ball and possession that causes overall our stats to look good in expected terms at the back end, but we're too gassed to convert. That could be a reason why, at least in some games, you see this gap opening up between expected and actual, right? Because the good ball's coming at the end when we're tired, and when you're tired, you probably aren't converting your good ball to points. So I think there's something in that. Another observation on this one, Andrew, is that it looks like if we just scored a try more a game, we would basically be exactly the same as Penrith on this chart.
Yeah, it's not that different. And I think that's also one of the reasons why, as much as I call the quadrants efficient and inefficient, especially this early in the season, there's a factor of luck in it as well. So, I mean, if you look at the game on the weekend, if Dallin Mateni-Zelezniak handles that ball or gets a penalty try, depending on whichever way you want to look at it, puts that down, it's a tied game, and maybe they end up picking up the win. So there's exactly, if you have another try game, you'd be possibly pushing into that dominant quadrant. So at least early in this season, there's an element of luck involved there. Yeah. And you've seen that that's probably not the only case over the last few weeks. So that's why, again, to point back to, I don't think the sky's falling, because you're looking at the structures and what they're doing, and they're putting themselves in the best position to succeed. Unfortunately, not everything's going their way, and that's going to happen over the course of a season. But you'd like to think that over the course of a season, it would even out.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Knights game and Dallin's incident. There was 2 in the Titans game that were 50-50 calls, didn't go our way.
Yep.
Manly, we had a opportunity to win that game in Golden Point, dropped the ball 20 metres out, right? So this is your chart here is showing that it's actually a small margin in points at this stage of the year between being in that dominant quadrant and not. And on the field, we're seeing it's small margins. Like, we could be sitting here now with those 3 things reversed, and we'd be sitting probably, I don't know, top 4, I think. Give us 3 wins.
You have 5 wins instead of 3. I mean, there's another one on the weekend, the try to disallow when Jackson Ford ran into Jackson Hastings. And he takes a half a step into the infield and just brushes Jackson Hastings' shoulder. That's a try. And then again, you're in that game, and this chart's looking a tiny bit better again.
But even if we did have that extra try game, it would still be the case that our expected is still way higher than our actual.
Yeah, you'd be sort of more sitting around league average for points scored rather than a little bit below it. So yeah, it'd be trending more toward that dominant quadrant than being inefficient or unlucky.
So even if we got those calls or those sort of examples we're giving, there would still be a question of why aren't we converting as much expected position into points, right? So we'll come to that. All right, sweet. Shall we move to defence?
Yeah.
Okay, so looking at average actual expected points conceded versus actual. Okay, so where do we sit here, Andrew, and what does it tell us?
So the Warriors are in that dominant quadrant, so they allow fewer than league average points per game, and they also allow fewer than league average expected points per game. And they've been sitting in this quadrant the whole season, and that's an extension of what happened last year. It was one of the things I sort of picked up very early in last year, that the Warriors defense was very much unlike what it had been previously. Really good at controlling meters past the game line and generally not allowing a lot of points, and that's continued this year. So I think, and defensively, I don't think there's any issues. And you saw even against the Knights, the points they did allow, there was that try initially when Chance fumbled the ball just under the posts. They're not conceding a lot of points in ways that I would deem concerning. Mm-hmm. So I think their defensive structures and defensive system is still working really well.
Yeah, okay. So if you look at the last chart in this one, you'd say actually, big picture, attacks where we need to be tweaking, right? Which is different to what I said last week on the pod, I think, Will, when I was talking to Sammy last week, after the Titans game. I said, well, look, we scored 24 points. Our attack's probably fine. Our defence is the issue. But actually, looking at this, it might be the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the one thing I think, and that's why I'm not so down on them. And I generally focus a lot of my thoughts on who's doing well, on who's a strong defensive team, because any team can score points. You look at North Queensland this year; they're scoring a stack of points, but they couldn't guard a closed door. And at the end of the season, you're going to get into the finals, and the good teams, the Melbournes, Penriths, and the Warriors at this stage, they know what you're going to do, and they're going to take that away from you. So how do you win a game if you can't defend it? Your opponent, you're not going to score more points than them because they're taking away your best attacking movements. You've got to rely on your defense, and if you don't have good defense, then it's far easier to win a game 14-12 than try and win one 28-24.
But even on that, though, looking here, it looks like the expected points we've got are the lowest in the league, right? Yeah. So that in terms of where we let other teams have the ball, how close we let them get to our line. And our actuals are good, but they're not the best in the league. So again, there's a gap between, our actual goal line defense, let's say, is okay, but really what's causing us to be good defensively is stopping teams getting there more than our actual goal line D. Would that be a fair comment?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you look at the average points conceded per game, they're roughly in line with the Roosters. But the Warriors are conceding probably 4 to 5 fewer points of expected value. So their field position that they give up is much better than the Roosters. I mean, that's probably been historically the case for the Roosters too. They've always been a bit sort of pushing the envelope discipline-wise, and they're happy to back up on their own goal line because they know they can defend it. So that would check out for me. But yeah, there's definitely would be some more cases of where some points probably went against them that didn't go that probably wouldn't usually. And again, I'll go back to that Chance fumble under the post. You'd probably pick that up 9 times out of 10 or 95 times out of 100. So that's a try that would be usually not considered so it wouldn't be a try I'd be overly concerned about because it's not a structural issue.
Mm-hmm. So you sort of get to this point and you're saying we've got a team here whose system is working really well in terms of where they get the ball and where they give other teams the ball. Probably the best in the league in that sense. However, their attack is misfiring, so they're not converting that position into points at the rate you'd like, and that's actually a problem. And their defense is okay, but actually their defensive actuals are based mostly on the fact they're denying other teams the opportunity to get close rather than, goal line defence or individual one-on-ones. I mean, that's basically the picture we've got at this point.
Yeah, I think there's a number, might be in the post or elsewhere, I might have put on social media, but I think they hold opponents to about 65% of their play the balls in their own half.
Yep.
So, and that's the best in the league. There's not many teams over 60%. Right. So they are really pinning teams down in their own half. And I think that's obviously leading to why their expected point value is so low. And then if you're not giving teams the chances to get close to the line, that's also going to reduce their opportunities to score. So that's why I think there's definitely some work that could be done to bring that down a little bit better, a little bit more. But considering where they are and some of the injuries and things that are going on, I don't think it's a terrible result.
Yeah. And when we look at players like Rocco Berry and Dallin who lead our kick chase, they're the ones who are really, and Sean's kicking game, they're the ones who are pinning the opposition in that, back corner and is causing them to not have a lot of play the balls in our half. And so those players might have other issues and so on, but that contribution is important in terms of expected result on these metrics. Okay. So, Will, any comments from you here, mate, before we roll through?
No, I mean, all the defensive side of things makes sense, I think, and it correlates more or less with what we've been talking about the last few weeks. I mean, we had the best defence in the league, I think, as far as points conceded per game across the first 5 rounds, and then that's dropped off a bit, but we're not hemorrhaging huge amounts of points. There hasn't been any big scores racked up against us. I think there's probably the concern we've had is the lack of goal line resistance. It isn't taking teams too much to break us down on the goal line, whereas last year a hallmark, I think, of their success was being able to soak up heaps of pressure and, not being worried about being camped on our line, where it doesn't really seem like this season we've really had to do that. We either give up a try or we're just, because we're able to keep teams down the right end of the field, we're not having to be on our own line. But yeah, too many points for how much ball is actually getting down there, I think.
And that's interesting, right? Because it means if you start drawing the lines through these things, it means our D is good in terms of preventing teams marching down the field at us. And our attack is good in terms of us marching down the field into good ball areas. But our defence is not necessarily that good in terms of stopping attacking good ball set. And our attack is not that good in terms of converting, right? And so I want to go to, Andrew, really cool chart you've got here. Rank of average meters past play the ball tackle by opponent for the Warriors, right? Which shows that, firstly, like you said earlier, we are the best in the league in terms of causing the opposition to stay in their own half against us. And then also we're really good at stopping teams make yardage on tackles 2, 3, 4, 5. Do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I sort of referenced it before. So I look at the meters that each team makes past the play the ball. So obviously if someone starts running behind the play the ball, they're getting a couple of not so much free meters, but they're meters that aren't progressing you further down the field. So if we just look at the meters past the play the ball to where they get tackled by a team and then put that around and look at each opponent, you can get an idea of who's. I wouldn't say it's a proxy for line speed, but it gives you a bit of an indication on line speed as well. But also how sound that defense is and that's consistent throughout the set. So the Warriors, I think, as you mentioned, they're ranked 3rd, 5th, 6th, and 4th on tackles 2 through 5. I don't include tackle 1 because that's somewhat influenced by kick returns and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it shows that the Warriors are consistent. They don't allow a lot of extra meters throughout the set. There's not many teams who are consistently in the bottom sort of top 5 or 6 teams throughout a set. Like you get a team like Newcastle who does really well on tackle 3, but they're quite bad on tackle 2 and 4. So yeah, it shows that throughout a set, they're generally not allowing extra meters on any tackle.
So that would suggest possibly that our transition's really good. So when we give the other team the ball, we pin them and, that gets us on the front foot. And also that our line speed and wrestle is good, right? Because we're slowing the ruck down, which is interesting because I think part of our problem in attack has been sort of a lack of dominant carry from our middles. and talk about our middles a bit later. But it looks like in defence we don't really have any problems with our middle forwards holding opposition.
Yeah, so definitely what I would draw from this as well.
Yeah, okay. All right, so where do we go next? Let's look at overall run meters then, which I think is at the end of your post, Andrew. You might have it to hand, but how are the Warriors ranking in overall run meters? So the opposite of that.
Run meters. Did I have this here? I'm trying to find it.
If you didn't, it's my bad.
I don't recall having run meters in here. Sorry.
No, that's all good. I think though we're sitting pretty high. We seem to consistently win overall run meters in games, but so for example, we won it on the weekends. We won it against the Titans, but we're losing games. And I've done some previously. I've had a look at samples of seasons, and generally, if you win average meters, total run meters, and average meters per run, you're going to win a game. So we're in that unusual position of being a team that's successful, I think, on both sides of the ball in terms of controlling run meters and gaining run meters, but it's not working for us.
Yep.
And actually, you do have a chart here, net run meters per.
I do have that one. Yeah, so that's chart showing basically looking at meters per run gained and then taking away meters per run conceded. So are you gaining more meters than your opponents on an individual run basis? Because if you're doing that, then you sum that up to however many runs you have in a game, 130, 150, whatever it is. You sort of get an idea of who's doing well there. So at this stage, Warriors are fourth in the competition. They had 0.46 of a meter, so 46 centimeters as a net meters per run. So they gain 46 centimeters more than their opponent. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but again, when you roll it up over 150 odd runs in a game, that's a reasonably substantive number. It's pretty much identical to the Roosters. They're at about the same value. And the only teams ahead of them are Canterbury and Penrith at 1 net meter per run in the positives. And that's mostly because those two teams are the best defensive teams in terms of allowing overall run meters.
So interesting. You got 3 out of 4 Penrith senior and assistant coaches in the top 4 there.
Yeah, someone noted that on social media last week, I think, and I'm annoyed at myself that I didn't pick it because you had Webby, Serrato, and Cleary in there. And that's 3 of the 4.
It's part of the Penrith system.
Yeah.
Okay. So we now need to explain why is it that we seem to be doing all these fundamentals right, but we're not winning games. So can you talk us through the heat map that you've got of Warriors play the ball locations and what it tells us about the shape we're throwing at teams?
Yeah, so it's just a heat map. So looking at all the play the ball locations on the field and just doing a heat map. So you're looking at where the majority of play the balls are occurring. That gives a sort of more intense part of the visualization. So it looks a little bit more red, and then it goes down to sort of yellow and green, depending if they're lower incidences of those happening. And so the Warriors have a really strong incidence of play the balls through the middle of the field. I think there's a chart in here as well, I think, where I talk about them having, I think, 70% of their play the balls occur in the middle third of the field, so sort of between the tram tracks. And that's the highest in the competition. And if you tie that up to where they're scoring their tries, I think I've got 39% here, and I think after the weekend it was 41, and they're first in the NRL in tries scored through the middle of the field. And then they are lowest on tries scored down the left side, which is, I think, 18%, and that's tied with the Dragons. And they're the only two teams that have scored fewer than 20% of tries on either edge of the field. So it's really rare for teams not to be scoring tries down the edges, whereas the Warriors are just very focused through the middle of the field. So as I said, it seems somewhat predictable in the amount of traffic that's being sent through the middle. And maybe that's something that teams have picked up on, and they know that the Warriors are going to be pushing the ball through the middle of the field and then spreading it and shifting it right towards the end of the set.
Yeah. So, I mean, the way I look at that is we've basically got AFB, the one-man army, who's punching some tries through the middle. And also, if you're just relying on having won the field position game and fatigue, you kind of just can fall over the line in the middle.
Yeah.
And I think we're doing that a bit. But when we're setting up...
Sort of that Dylan Walker trading on the weekend was sort of a bit like
example.
that.
Yeah. Whereas when we're setting up for shape, it's always going right and it's hardly ever going left. And so that creates a predictability. That's an issue. We need to talk about that. And so that's exactly what we see, Will, right? I mean, we were talking about that with Sammy last week.
Yeah, and again, a case of it against Newcastle, we're just peppered that right side, and Newcastle had all the answers. And when it came to the left, it wasn't really much happening. I think I sort of went back, and I'm pretty sure I'm not mistaken that we haven't scored a try even to the left of the uprights, not let alone, right out wide, since South Sydney in round 5. So, yeah. And Webster talked about this on the show today with Sammy, that, they need to be more of a threat on both sides, not so one-dimensional in terms of where they try and score their points.
The conditions on Sunday as well. Sorry, well, I was just going to say the conditions on Sunday as well weren't fantastic for that sort of right spread either. So trying to spread it that wide, you almost had the wider you get, almost the worse it is, given how slippery conditions were. So it probably was always going to be difficult to score on those right side shifts.
Yeah, and so
absolutely,
I'm going to step a little bit away from the stats for a second here, Will. And so Webby said two things about that. He said, firstly, we know that we need to be a team that has strike on both sides of the field, right? So there's been a lot of talk about move RTS from the left side to the right side, get him outside Sean, right? And Webby, I think, was quite clear in saying, no, we want strike on both sides. And so, let's say the left edge ends up being Jackson Ford or Catewell, Pompey, Murata, and it's Tamare or CHT, whoever ends up there. You're just getting more right heavy, aren't you? Because now you've got Roger out there. The centre of gravity is all right. So the idea of having Roger on the left is consistent with that idea that we need, to have two sides. We just got to work out a way to make that happen. That was the first thing. The second thing is he said, yeah, look, I know teams know we're going to go right, but last year they knew we were going right too, and they couldn't stop it because we're executing that well. And so we need to get a little bit better at our execution on the right. And we also need to be a credible threat on the left. And I completely agree with that. So, I'm very comfortable with Webby's sort of approach to that. I suppose the question is, what do you reckon is stopping us executing as well as last year on the right? And what do you reckon is stopping us getting to the left? That's one for you, Will. Andrew's not going to.
Oh, sorry, mate.
He's got to do stats on 17 teams, and he's not micro watching Andrew's shape.
Well, I'll sleep there for a second, boys. It just seems to be just a lack of maybe cohesion, execution. There has been a few, Chance came into the season late. But it is really hard to pinpoint. Even some of the tries that they've scored, it hasn't been as fluid as, just some of the clockwork tries on the right that they scored, or a lot of them. Dallin's had to do a lot of work to score the tries that he has, and a lot of flying finishes rather than just, straight overlap, run it in and dot down. It's above my pay grade trying to figure out exactly what is going wrong there and why we're not getting the same sort of clinical opportunities or executing those sort of opportunities like we were last year. But
I'll tell you what I reckon. Right. So last year, the classic shape we were throwing was a double lead run coming in sort of off a quick play of the ball in the middle. So what does that mean? We're pretty much setting up under the post on left side and we're trying to get a 5-5 split, right? Something like that. And so then Egan and someone like Fanua Blake or another middle is tying up the AB and the markers. So outside of that, you've got three players. You've got the for the opposition, you've got the half, the centre, the winger, right? And Egan's throwing a no-look pass to Sean. He's engaging the half. And meanwhile, you've got our centre and our edge back row running outside in, right? So the centre for the opposition comes in, Chance comes out the back, and the opposition fullback doesn't follow Chance because he's worried about his half controlling a crash ball coming into our edge back row or our centre. And so he holds, goes to Chance, tip on, Dallin, score. So what's different this year? We're not getting the fast play the ball out of the ruck, right? Egan doesn't seem to be able to engage and tie up the AB in the same way. The crash line from the right edge back rower is not as convincing or scary to the opposition, so they're not holding, and the fullback isn't holding either. He's going, he's following. And the effect of that is it kind of works, but the margin was only small. Even last year, Dallin was having to dive acrobatically. to get into a corner, right, on these tries. Now so we had like 4 inches to spare, right? Now it's just that little microsecond off out of Egan, out of Sean. The defence is releasing that split second earlier, and that's all it takes, and it breaks. And so it was actually a very complicated play in terms of the number of different things that had to go right to execute it, to the point of you need a winger who could finish by aerially acrobating into the corner, right? And we're just that far off this year, and it's not quite happening. So there's a question there around who is the right edge back rower, and do they have the right presence? Why are our middle carries not generating the same quick play the ball and sort of engagement around that middle? Is Egan playing busted? There's all these things. It's sort of a broader conversation for another day, but it's lots of little micro things like that, I think, that are doing it. Alrighty, so Andrew, where do we take this? You're a Warriors fan, right? So imagine you're a Warriors fan.
Okay, yes, going to tell you.
You've seen this, you've heard this, you've observed this. First thing, do we sack the coach?
Oh, I think it'd be absolutely insane to sack the coach. He's proven that he's probably, I don't know, I want to rank him, but he's one of the, over the last 18 months, he's been one of the top coaches in the competition. And you can see from the success that Serraldo's had this year, there's clearly clearly having a bit of a Panthers lineage in your background is going to help you defensively. So I think any course to call out to sack Webster would be incredibly premature at this stage. Yeah. I think, everything's working. I think to me, it looks like there's a bit of bad luck, which we mentioned with some of the tries that weren't given that could have been given, or someone's dropped the ball, something like that. Similarly with some of the tries conceded, like the defensive structures are good. There's a few few errors that might not have, you wouldn't expect to occur, that are leading to points. I think that there's some sort of something with the execution, especially on that right side, that just isn't there this year. And maybe just a couple of little tweaks could fix that.
Well, let's go a bit slower. So we don't want to sack the coach. In fact, we'd probably say that the system and the expected points and points conceded we're seeing here is consistent with actually a very good coach who's instilled a system and the team's understood it and are creating the conditions where they should be able to win a lot of games. Would that be fair? Yeah,
I think so. And I think that the other thing to put on it is to not only consider how well he's gone, but where they came from the year before, the year prior, and even before that. It's not like they're in a situation with Penrith where they had where they were doing reasonably well and just went to another level. I think that there's not that people are forgetting the history, but they've maybe come to expect more than they're getting. Yeah,
and they should.
Unrealistic expectations. They're doing really well. They're not. A couple of results haven't gone their way, but system-wise, they're still doing great. And I think he's shown himself to be a great coach.
So, would you make wholesale changes to this team at this point?
I wouldn't do that either. I think there's also some issues with depth in the middle. I think I know a few people, and possibly yourself, have mentioned Niokore returning would make a huge difference. I know as a long-suffering Eels fan, I did miss when he left. He was a great depth piece for the Eels when they were doing well. Ability to cover multiple positions and strong run of the ball. Adding him back and taking up a bit of load from Adam Blake would certainly help. But maybe there's a few different sort of minor changes they could make. I would think wholesale changes at this stage could risk also unsettling some defensive consistency as well.
Well, yeah, because if the system broke, right, based on what the actuals and expecteds are showing, if the system broke and we weren't winning the expecteds, we'd be in some world of trouble at this point, wouldn't we?
Yeah, it's like you sort of think about what situation you're in. Do you want to be in a situation where you've got a good system but you're not getting the results you'd like, or you're in a system or in a situation where you've also got a bad system and you're not getting good results? So I think, it's not great to be not winning, but again, I think there's sort of an unrealistic expectation that they're going to win every game or win 20 games in a season. That's probably not going to be the case. I think it's not the sky's not falling. I think there's good systems here, and hopefully a bit of luck goes their way, and things will be on the improve without too many big changes.
So here's my last one. So there was a time a little while ago when I think it was Desi at the Bulldogs got fixated on completions because he saw he saw the correlation between winning completions and winning games. And all things equal, if you are throwing the same shapes and running the same lines and so on, if you win completions, you would expect to win a game. But once you start optimizing for completions at the expense of other parts of the game, it turned out it didn't work so well, right? So it's that old thing. Once you start trying to game a variable, you kind of muck up the statistical background or data background on which that variable was predictive of success, and you get a problem. Do you think there's a possibility that Webby is optimizing for expected returns here at the expense of actuals? And so, for example, there's a significant section of the Warriors fan base who don't like Rocco Berry, who want him to be replaced with someone like Ali Leotoa, who's more of a strike centre than Rocco is. Whereas Rocco is excellent and leads our kick chase, and he's generally got very good defensive tackle efficiency and so on. So if I were trying to optimise expected outcomes, I would pick Rocco Berry. If I was trying to create strike and extra points, I'd probably pick Ali Leotoa, right? So do you think there's a possibility that coaches who get the same kind of stats that you do from their stats teams, maybe some of them, maybe Webby, are optimizing for expected returns, and that's actually perversely causing them to fail on actuals in the same way that completions fail for Desi?
Yeah, I mean, there's a saying, I think it's something along the lines of, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So if you're focusing too much on a goal, you're optimizing for that goal, and then there are other unintended consequences. So I think I think what you're talking to is there's a point in the post where I talk about how they don't commit a lot of errors, which again is ahistoric for Warriors teams. So I think the number I had was, if you look at the number of touches they have a game and how many errors are generated, the Warriors generate an error once every 49 touches, which is the best in the competition. The worst in the competition is Brisbane at 33. But if you think about how Brisbane play and how they incorporate Reece Walsh, and they almost embrace his errors because they know that he's creating attacking plays and attacking movements, and it's causing uncertainty in the defense. Whereas I think, as you said, if you're gaming for high completion rate, you're probably playing a very predictable style of football because you don't want to throw bad passes. You don't want to put people in situations where they're not going to catch a ball. And you're also limiting the chance of a risky pass becoming a try. So I think the point you made about completion rate, it's not. I think it's good to a point. There's a certain point where once you start becoming too fixated on it, you become very deliberate and very restrictive in how you attack. And the good teams will generally try and mix that and create a happy medium. I mean, if the Roosters in the 2010s were one of the worst completing teams in the competition, but it's because they threw the ball around. They knew they could score points, and if they made a mistake, they didn't worry because they knew they could defend it as well. And I think that the Warriors have a structure that probably could support that, but it's also a matter of how much risk is the coach willing to take on.
Yeah, because I think that's my ultimate takeaway from this conversation and the thinking I've been doing lately, which is Webby likes workers and he likes experienced players. All right, so we got worker back rowers. Rockerberry's a worker right edge centre. He likes, he obviously wants yardage out of his back five. Barnett's a worker middle, but he's not a dynamic middle, right? Injuries is part of this. We don't have Recorder. We don't have, some of these players. So I wonder whether Webby, who came on our podcast last year and told us that he'd sat down and worked out the three things that were going to win NRL games, right? And he didn't tell us what they were. But I wonder if those three things mapped actually quite closely, Andrew, to your expected outcome variables. And his selections and his coaching are designed to do that. And maybe there's just an emphasis that way that's a little bit too strong. I'm not saying that's the case, but to me, that's the question. Otherwise, I think the takeaway for me is that we're on the right track, just going to hang in there and things might well turn.
Yeah, I think the point you're talking about with the section of the fan base is not necessarily enamored with Rocco Berry. I think that a lot of time people get focused on numbers, and one of the issues is we don't have good numbers for defensive metrics in rugby league. And so even with Rocco, when you mentioned his good tackle efficiency, the issue I have with missed tackles is you have to be in the position to make a missed tackle to record a missed tackle. So if you're out of position and you're not even trying to make a tackle, you won't get recorded a missed tackle. So there's an absence of a statistic there that indicates how bad someone is defensively. And I think that people will focus on someone who's more of a strike runner of the ball because they can see, they've got line breaks and they've got tackle busts. But if you look at the structure of a team and how it's set up and what the coach is asking of them, they actually want that safe player who's a good defender and makes the right decision and has good footy IQ, rather than a guy who's going to make a line break but then also throw a bad pass or have a poor defensive read. So they want players they can trust. And I think that the issue, you want to have a mix of those players in a team. You need to have some strike players. You need to have some solid workers and good defensive teams. It's, everyone will have a certain role, and you want the people who fit those roles or know their role really well. So I think, again, making wholesale changes or putting people in positions they're not necessarily useful for, there's no point weakening one position to strengthen another. There's probably a better way of doing it.
Awesome, mate. Well, thank you very much. Will, any last questions for Andrew before we thank him and let him get on with his day?
Look, I think you've done more than enough for us already, mate. And just want to say incredible work that you're doing. Certainly a leader in your field, and anyone out there that likes to look at the game, especially like the likes of Fonzie does, should get right behind it, contribute to the Rugby League Eye Test, share it far and wide, and just a big thanks, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear all about what you're doing, and thank you again for featuring the Warriors so extensively this week. It gives us a hell of a lot of extra stuff to go on.
No, thanks. Again, I appreciate letting me have the time to talk about it on the pod. And again, hopefully we'll see some better days for the Wires. I do want to mention as well, Will, in the promo you put on Instagram, you gave me one of the best compliments I ever get from people is where someone will say, the guys from the Rugby League Eye Test or the boys from the Rugby League Eye Test, as if there's a team of people doing it. And it's honestly just myself doing it in my spare time outside of, I've got a full-time job and a young family. So to me, the best compliment I can get from anyone is hearing that they think that I do the work of multiple people. So I very much appreciate that. And I know you guys have been strong supporters of the site. And again, I can't say more than enough thanks for the sharing of the content you've been doing. It's been fantastic.
If you got a few bucks, buy Andrew a coffee, guys. If you got a few bucks, just buy him a coffee.
That was more Brad.
The site. So if you want to donate for my time, that's fine. But I'm happy just to get the numbers out there and have people talking more about data and rugby league. I think it's a underdeveloped area of the game. And as I sort of led with as well, I don't think it's going to answer everything, but there's definitely more we could be doing with it.
That was actually Brad doing the promo yesterday.
I'm sorry,
and probably more ignorance than anything that he thought. But it could easily be a team of people doing the work that you're doing that's so extensive and detailed and valuable to people like us that like to look a bit deeper. So again, fantastic stuff.
Alrighty, thanks everyone. Hope that sort of has helped us work through this whole what's wrong with the Wires. Give Sammy a listen earlier, and you'll hear the Rugby League Eye Test mentioned there. And it's a great segue into the deep dive we've done here. And until next week, go the Warriors.